I actually feel like a composer, and probably my heart is very close to classical art forms. So this is not everything I'm doing, but this is something I'm drawn to. All the technology, gadgets. I'm one of these guys that likes this side. So I love to go to hear the orchestra live, and I like to write the music that is for acoustic instruments. But I also love electronic sounds. I love sitting at the computer, coffee on the side, and just creating new things, new sounds, new landscapes. And in this field, I have to say that there's not much not that much from innovation. It's not our job. It's there are companies that create brilliant software, and we are in great shape right now. It's all you need is laptop. I actually don't need powerful computers right now to process amazing sounds. We're living in a great times. There's one problem though. The problem starts when you want to bring this music that you love on stage and share it with other people. Here's what happens. You say, okay, I'm going to perform something live. I'm going to do so-called live electronics with my laptop. So I put the laptop on stage, and I go, and I bow, and I move my mouse, and for the next half hour, I'm just there, and people wonder, it's like, are you checking your email, or are you really doing something? So I realized that there is still a gap to fill in this weird performance thing. We don't really need to perform electronic music. You can create it ahead of time, but there's something about social interaction with the audience. So I was looking for ways to actually be able to trigger some sounds, to perform this layer live with some kind of interface. And one thing that I was dreaming of when I was a kid was this instrument that I have some kind of a little ball that depending on when I hit will trigger different sounds. I think it was like a little dream of being a magician. You do something in the air and something happens, right? And I was experimenting with different sensors, with acceleration sensors that you plug in. You have like different cables around, almost like a glove. But I realized that there's always something lacking. It's not organic enough. Infrared sensors, the same thing. They measure surface, but it doesn't feel organic. And then I thought about this very old instrument. It's called Theremin. We are talking about Silicon Valley innovation, but this instrument was invented, in fact, in 1920. It's 93 years old. Obviously, it was in a slightly different shape, was bigger, you need a lot of electricity. This was later, I think, 70s Moog, right? It was later. They sort of reinvented it, and now it's commercially available. But what is beautiful about it is that it doesn't measure a single point. It just measures how much flesh in the air is around your hand, and then it produces simple tone. And antennas in the center, they control volume. What I did is I connected to the computer, and computer analyzes this information, and based on this information triggers whatever I want. So I create little algorithms that I can change during the performance, and I can trigger sounds basically by moving hands, like this childish dream of being a magician. Something happens when I move my hand in a certain area. So that was my take on bringing my own sensors. Many artists are actually experimenting with that. I think there's still need to create something that allows you to perform electronic music with this human aspect. So I wouldn't even call it, as we're talking innovation, I would rather think about we should go back to simple solutions and try to find humanity in technology, because we have technology. 60s was the time for innovation. Now we should all find a way to make it more human, and that was one of my takes. Should we?
That's great introduction to a world that we could talk about for more than an hour. That's for sure, and I love the subject. I was struck in the late 90s when I met the inventor of the Theremin. He came for a visit to Stanford with this guy who had an incredible career, some of it covert, hidden. We don't know what he was doing in the Soviet Union. We know he was in New York for a little while. We know that there was always this kind of side to him, which was fascinated with how mankind can project new sorts of capacities, through technology. But he was also fascinated with exactly what Jakub just said, this sort of connection back to what we would do if we were just making music with rocks. And we can do that, and we can play music with anything. Music is very, very deep here, and it's very deep in time, and in present time, well, in Theremin's time, he described this dream he had of kind of listening into the void and hearing the sound. It was a sound that came from some other planet or place or part of his consciousness which he didn't know existed. And he wanted to get to that sound. It's a little bit like you and the magic gesture, So you guys share something, I think, in that. And for him, the technology of the time was just the advent of radio. So vacuum tube, circuitry, and all that goes with that. And to implement something that could make a sound that you've never heard before. How many people could imagine a sound that they've never heard right now? Can you do it? You can make a sound that you've never heard. I'm always curious if that's possible.
Ironically, the sound that Theremin eventually used was actually the purest form of sound, which is sine wave.
Right.
This is like the basic ingredient of every sound that there is, and there's no simpler sound in theory of acoustics.
And he didn't have to do much more than that. He had a few little things to go, but that was about the extent of the quality difference.
Change of weight, but the principle. But what happened was that the Theremin players, because the sound was so pure and too, I would say dead even, that they were trembling their hands. So later, also unfortunately, this sound became used a lot in horror movies. So these people who started playing...
Somebody just did it, yeah. Good vibrations, too.
Yeah, they were very upset that this new instrument is actually being downgraded to horror movies. Yep. But that's what happens with electronic music. Even.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so we're a good tag team. This is great. So Clara Rockmore was a kind of very close associate, let's say, of Theremin. Clara was a violinist in the 30s who had a phenomenal career, as a young, soloist, touring all the time. But she started to have trouble with her just physical, holding the violin. Her hands weren't working in some way, and she came to Theremin about maybe some alternative, just at the right time. He had invented this instrument that only required moving your hands in space. But here's this superbly trained violinist who was a good example of musical training being more than just how it's a gesture on the instrument. It's more than just the physical chops that proficiency there. It's here, and Clara started a second career performing the Theremin all over the world. A lot of it in the States, but in Europe as well. And there's recordings of Clara Rockmore in the 90s. So much, much later, where she's kept absolutely everything about the expression. And I wish we had sort of prepared this part, because all you have to do is listen to 30 seconds of Clara playing Rachmaninoff on the Theremin, and you get everything. You get everything. And for me, with the students that we have in our group at Stanford, and some of the work that we're doing to push further and further into this exact same quest that we were talking about, it feels like we're only making baby steps. We go back to Clara's performance on the Theremin in the 1920 concept, and it's kind of a gold standard still.
What happens also, I observed that there among very different instrument designs, those that are simple give you limited possibilities of larger structure, harmony, but at the same time, they give you a possibility to be very expressive. So theremin, violin, these are instruments that usually you play one line, but because you have a control over the sound so closely, you can actually make it very expressive. Larger instruments like organs, you play with the same volume each, no matter how hard you press the key. So you have less expression, but at the same time you have larger space to control, a few keyboards, registers, everything. So I think there's a pattern there that instruments that are simple, they are very personal, intimate, they give you a lot of control. Larger structures, larger instruments give you less personal feeling, but at the same time, obviously, they can be louder, bigger, they can cover more register. And the theremin, not as I will present today, but the original theremin is one of these instruments that is very simple. You will never see me playing theremin. I never actually tried even to play theremin. I'm just using these instruments as something totally different. I'm using them as a control. And my approach is actually, in a way, less personal. I wanted to have a larger scale, structures, many layers, many tracks. I don't even know if it's an instrument. It's more like an instrument/digital working station, performing instrument, something else, because I make this conscious decision that I want to have control over many different sounds, many different layers.
Do you ever switch modes and get in there and shape a single note?
Yeah, actually I can, what I did, the closest I can do is kind of a vocal sound, but it sounds very spooky. Even when we are working with Jessica, she's like, you know what, it's not a good idea. It's too spooky.
So that's great. Could you explain a little more about how you approach the composition of the ballet?
Yeah, that was a really interesting process. Something that I'm not that familiar with. For me, it was like a new ground. So first, I made a piece for Jessica, some kind of a temporary track. So she had a slight idea what this music might be about. And then I started breaking it down to sounds that can be performed using theremins. So it's kind of a reverse order. First, I try to have some kind of composition, then break it down to the set that I can improvise. And then during rehearsal, I was constantly modifying and bringing new things. And my idea is that this piece should never be performed the same twice. That's the whole point, that dancers are able to dance the entire piece in silence, and I can fill in, and each time be slightly different. So it's a strange approach, but I think for us creators, it's a great journey to some new way of thinking about this the process of creation.
And maybe you could contrast that to working purely acoustically, with an ensemble or an orchestra.
Yeah, with ensemble, you have peace of mind, and even with choreographers, usually you deliver some work, you'll get some feedback or not. Usually choreographer will take it and create another piece on top of it. So it's different. I'm not saying it's, I wouldn't judge any of this, because that's also a beautiful process. When we work on Kusho with Jessica, it was electronic music but pre-composed. And some elements came from acoustic music, and it was also a beautiful process. I remember I was actually on the boat, and the whole piece was about water and ink, and the sounds were made out of sounds of water. So I was actually on the boat on Mediterranean, and creating this piece for Jessica in my headphones. So I had her in my mind all the time. It's like, will she like this? Is this going to be good for dance? It was also a beautiful process, very, I would say, internal, and you can focus on perfection and make sure that each time it will be the same. This is very different.
Yeah, this is the first time we've met, and I'm sort of getting a picture as we go. So, Mediterranean boat suffering for his art. A gong. Okay, that's good. Good, yeah, it sounds good. Looking forward to it. And I don't know if anybody's actually said when the performance is. That's a good thing to say now.
We mentioned
19th? 21st. Yeah, okay, 1921. Yeah, so you did. Still on the subject of your work, maybe what else you've got in the in the cooker right now? Other projects that you might be doing apart from this one.
Yeah, I actually. This year I need to finish guitar concerto that I've been commissioned by Swedish guitarist, so it will be classical guitar with orchestra. I'm also working right now on the piece for an opera singer, a Polish opera singer, very well established. She had a very interesting background because on one hand she is this typical mezzo-soprano. She did Carmen in all over the world, you know, in the biggest opera's house. But at the same time, she's leaning toward pop music a little bit. She likes to flirt with other fields, and this is exactly how I feel. So we created this project of soprano and ambient music. So we call it like kind of ambient classical. We don't know what's going to happen, but she recorded, and I just have to work a lot on mixing it and perfecting. So that's another project I have. Another is another piece with Jessica for Jakub's Pillow Festival, and I think that will be a similar approach, although our idea is that I will be able to perform, but also we want to make sure that this piece will be recorded. So if she wants to keep going in future and perform it, I don't necessarily have to be there. So it will be also another way to experiment with this dual approach, improvisation, but at the same time, fixed piece.
So early in the evening, we talked about improvisation, and you said you'd expound on your sort of, tell us more about you and your feelings about improv and how you work with it.
Well, my background is partially in jazz. Long time ago, I had some, I would say, episode, few years in jazz school, and I used to do jam sessions back in Krakow, playing piano. And one thing I learned is that I don't really believe in pure improvisation. In other words, that you come into the room and do everything from scratch, especially not jam session. Obviously, there are some people who try to do like very avant-garde improv, that you meet two people and do something totally abstract. But in mainstream jazz, you always have some kind of foundation. You have standards that everyone knows, and even before you start, you have to negotiate what piece they're playing and how, who's playing solos and things like that. So I think improvisation is always some kind of a hybrid. It has to be grounded in something. Now, when I'm doing this improvisation myself and try to build many layers of music, I also have to ground it somehow. So my approach was, first I build a set of elements that I can do, and in a way design the performance so it's not fully improvised. A few years ago, I tried to make the system able to do full improvisation, and I went crazy. I could record elements and then loop it back, transpose everything with my hands. The problem I encountered was when I started doing it on stage, I noticed that the audience was lost, because imagine that I trigger certain sounds and sounds, it looks good that there's a connection between gesture and sound, but then I do some kind of gestures that are meaningful to the computer, that the computer changes sets or loops or transpose things, but the audience doesn't know what I'm doing. So then I revert back to simpler form, and now I'm actually working and perfecting the system to be able to sort of go through the piece with improvisation, but also with some kind of a schedule. I compare this instrument, I use this metaphor. The violin, if you're a violinist, well-trained violinist, you're like a bird. You can fly wherever you go. If you're an improviser, you can definitely fly wherever you go. But obviously you can't fly too fast. You can't lift heavy cargo. You won't make loud noises. This is more like a jumbo jet. I believe the music, electronic music sets should be more like a jumbo jet. They operate somehow on the autopilot sometimes. They are more complex. You have to work before you take off. You have to actually make some kind of a plan, schedule. You have to check if you have enough fuel and things like that. So this is, in my opinion, what I'm doing. I'm preparing the flight, and once I take off, I have some flexibility, obviously, where I go and some kind of freedom, and I'm still flying, but I know that it's not like, I'm not a bird, and I don't want to be.
This is fun, yeah. So I kind of like my job, because I listen to a new concept that's really engaging, and I kind of got fishing for the next one to tease you with. So, so forgive me if maybe this is the right format or not, but So you design algorithms for your machinery as well, as is clear. Could you ever describe your algorithms as being improvisers?
Like improvising with the algorithms?
The algorithm itself, improvising.
I know where you're going.
Yeah, so yeah. Just to have fun. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so the simple question is no, obviously I'm trying to just design a very simple system that works and performs what I want to do, and for that I'm using actually graphical visual programming language called MaxMSP. You create these patches, and I also have a little background in Java and like more traditional programming languages, and I would probably want to use them, but MaxMSP now has a partnership with Ableton Live, which is another great piece of software for live electronic music. So these two pieces of software together are brilliant, very comfortable. So I'm doing everything using these two tools. And my approach is basically I look at it and I'm thinking, okay, how this is supposed to work. I'm thinking, okay, if I move my hand here, do I want the sound to be triggered here? Or maybe I want something before with my hand, right? Or how fast I have to move this hand. Will it respond to the speed or not? If I hit it stronger, will it be louder or not? So it's purely functional, and then I'm trying to implement it. I'm guessing that what you're thinking of is thinking of algorithms and programming more as an art form, and probably that's what you're interested in, just creating live and improvising with algorithms. That's something that I definitely admire. I never actually had a chance to work with that.
And you know, it's part of the workshop for several musicians these days. You know, but it involves you know, taking a particular direction at what that sort of artificial musician should be doing, and how do you want to relate that to the music that you're doing? So it's not something that you can just sort of put in one box and say, does it work or does it not? It's really kind of a little bit like the jumbo jet thing in a sense, that if you go on autopilot, all sorts of things have to be working within the boundaries of your expectations. Of course,
you would write in real time, right?
Oh boy, yeah. So there's a scary world called live coding on stage, and you got to watch out for that one. It's actually, but it's really interesting now.
This concept is really beautiful, especially. I really think there's something beautiful in programming languages and this virtual world that is created. I simply think it's beautiful, and the philosophy behind it. And it's good that we met, because you'll see different approaches. For me, this is exactly something that I'm trying to go away from. Not that it's bad, it's just I chose another path, which is I don't want to create my internal world that no one else has access to. Because you have to admit that if you do live improvisation through the code, unless someone is looking over your shoulder and knows the same software, they won't be able to tell what you're doing. My approach is different. I want to do everything to get some kind of a connection with the audience, with other people, that they see that if I do one gesture, it can be simple, but there has to be some kind of a response from the system. That's the whole thing I'm working on, is actually all about that. All about, it's actually not an interface between me and the computer, which you might think it is. You know, I'm interface between what I'm doing and here like a keyboard. It's actually interface between me and the audience. That's how I want to think about it. Is I can do this music for myself. I don't even have to move my hands, but I believe that there is some kind of a social interaction, that we are still human animals, that we are used to the fact that if there is sound, someone is making it. You know, violin, piano, you press the key, we have to see this. So that's my take on the concept.
Yeah, I mean, my own personal thing is that I work mostly with sort of enhanced or augmented, say, computer assistants that are doing my bidding. They're not smart, they're machines, and they only work if they're doing something that kind of supports the overall music that I'm trying to do. But they are interesting when they can take a little bit of charge on the detail. And they can do things that maybe surprise, but within, again, the boundaries of the art that you're making. Surprise in a musical way, but not surprise that takes you out of the park, you know, and loses the thread. So the reason I brought up this idea of improvisation over in the world of algorithms is it's not because of any interest in live coding, which is more kind of like a sports event, if you ask me right now.
Quite fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's like a hacker fest of music on stage, you know, and you know, with a certain casualty rate. That's all I can say. But fascinating for sure, and it is an art form that's developing very rapidly right now. So you will see these. But you know, back to kind of where this lies for me, that there's a fundamental paradox in composing with computers at the level of algorithms, where you say, I want it to improvise. So when you write a computer program, you'd be completely lost at sea unless it was deterministic at the lowest level. That you write your program, you run your program, and then if you start it the same, with the same conditions, it will do the same thing. So without that, we wouldn't get very far starting our toaster in the morning with the microprocessor improvising, right? You just wouldn't get it. So at this very fundamental level, computers are predictable. And when you ask, how do I put improvisation into, you know, some algorithmic construction? So on its own, sort of automatically, it is this improviser, right? That's the question, and to me, it's the paradox, because a lot of the solution is say, okay, I'll use random number functions. You know, I'll go in there and allow a certain amount of indeterminacy through computer randomness. And that's the paradox, because the random function in the computer is not random. It starts at the same place. It'll give you the same sequence every time. So we've got something that's very different from what is improvisation in a human sense, which I think is much more about, well, we can go on in that direction, but trust and invention, and there's these elements that are going to be really hard to have yet.
Well, it's also hard to compare computers with the human brain. I think one of the beautiful thing about computers is that they showed us actually how complex is our mind, you know, when we are trying to recreate it, and we see this tremendous gap. So improvisation on a human level has totally different side to it than trying to make computers improvise. I would say it's still computers in a way are like mindless machines. We're still far from artificial intelligence.
Right.
I'm actually going to jump in and have you guys start your demos. Chris, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah.
And then we'll have Jakub kind of step
we'll
up.
Have interaction with the audience at some point, I hope.
Yeah, and so that I figured that would give a good leeway. Let you do your demos, and then we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes of some Q&A.
I use these things a lot. Interesting how often this is now becoming a problem at airport check-in. So what, you know, you have to say, it's like this. And what I'm going to demo is called a daxophone. This is created by John Granzo, who's a instrument builder, puppeteer, psychoacoustic scientist, and all sorts of other things, and a very gifted artist. He's done some work with 01 lately. And he was actually recreating a design by a German guitar maker, Heinz Steiner, who's came up with this name, daxophone, which is something in German that I don't know, but this is called the Dax. And you play it with a bow, and I just made it, so you can make it a little bit louder, I guess, but I would be very hard-pressed to make that exact same sound again, you know, even with a lot of time on this thing. I got close, you know, but had a little bit of a variation on the end, and that's actually what's fun about this thing, because it stays sort of near where you want it to be, but it throws curveballs at you. So you can see kind of the range that it's getting. Now, I'll tell you what it's made out of, and it's drastically simple. So this tongue of wood, it's really the same thing like you used to do with a ruler on a table, and you'd put it there and you'd snap the ruler, and if you wanted a different pitch, you could move the length of the thing, snap it differently. The only difference here is that you're using a bow on the ruler. John built these with a kind of sculptor's intuition here. You'll see through the tongue that it's got some cutouts in it. And, well, the cutouts are partly for the sound, partly conceptual. So I can tell you what the cutouts are, and this is a bit, a bit of a sort of technical fancy on his part. So if you look at the cutout that way, that's a spectrogram. And a spectrogram shows you the frequencies of a sound. So there's a lot of frequencies up in the high part of the spectrogram, fewer down here in the low part of the spectrogram. And he made these tongues from a big stick of wood up in Canada, and he took the stick of wood. This will be the stick of wood that he got out of the lumber yard. And he had a microphone, and he went like that, got a thunk, and took a spectrogram of that, analyzed the frequencies of it, and then drove a thing that could cut the hole from the picture of the frequencies of the thunk. And then he cut it off. And then he got a different thunk on the shorter piece and just did that recursively. So each one of these has a slightly different signature. So it's a little bit of a game that he's playing, but it actually changes the sound. Each one of these tongues has a real personality to it. John's first thing that he was doing, this is the full story on it now, which is good enough to take your time. It's really worthy, I think, I hope. So I mentioned he's a puppet maker, and the project involved kind of going back to this 18th century invention of vacuum. This guy Boyles, who invented how to extract the air from a glass jar, suck it out with a pump. The pump was made out of wood and leather. It was by today's standards, all I can say is it would be really cool to be able to build one today. And he did it then. It's very hard to do today. We just don't have the skill with those kind of materials like he had. John did it. So he built for his gallery show, vacuum pump a la Boyles, wood gears, leather, everything like that. And then he put a puppet inside the bell jar, extracted the air, and there's this puppet head that's sort of looking like it's talking, right? So one of the fascinations when the lack of atmosphere was discovered was that sound doesn't transmit through vacuum. There's no way for the sound waves to propagate because there's nothing to propagate in. And the sad side of this is that Boyles had a kind of career as a showman going around Europe with these bell jars, putting animals inside, sucking the air out, and watching them scream to death. And so John's kind of recapturing this ugly moment in time, and he built a voice for the puppet, and that's what the daxophones are. So I'm going to try and play it like a poor talking puppet in a vacuum jar somewhere in Leipzig. Thank you. So totally invite you to come up and play with it afterwards. No harm can be done. No animals die. Yeah. So, that works.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. So as I said, these two devices right now are working. They're sending very simple tone to my computer. So what I usually do before any kind of performance, I would define the zone that the computer is supposed to respond. So I say, here are my limits. And then this is the very simple tone synthesized that is very good for demonstration of very simple gesture to a sound. So you can see if I make an aggressive gesture, it will be different, right? Because in this particular case, I didn't have any use for the central zone, I thought, okay, it could be a pitch bend. And then double it on the other side. As you can see, it's very sensitive. Then I can change, with foot switch, I change to other instruments. Here we have drums. We can also sample things from, this is actually prepared piano. So in each different zone here, I will have different sound, as you can see. So depending when I hit it, something else will come. Then, obviously, I can play a little bit with percussive loops. Another algorithm, I would say, another version of the instrument I created specifically for Jessica's dance is with the bells with the reverse reverb. See this, I don't want to play too much because you actually see it during the show. Another thing that we were talking about that it's too spooky for many occasions, but I actually love it, is the vocal-like quality of this. So in right hand is the pitch, and the left is defining the syllables. And then I obviously can layer different tracks together. This is basically like the overview you have of how I'm thinking about it, more like digital audio working station when you start layering different loops on top of each other and can actually go through the performance, adding, changing, and so forth. Yeah.
Fantastic. We've got about 10 minutes. Do we have any questions in the audience for either of our guests?
What happens
is at the Stanford University Center of Research and Music.
Yeah.
What are you trying to do there?
So yeah, you can shorten that to CCRMA, which got pronounced karma a long time ago. So that's what it's called. Well, it's kind of an umbrella organization with composers, scientists, technicians, engineers, and started out. It's a long act, and it's been going since the 60s. So it was from the very early days of computer music synthesis. So the very first work was just how do you get a musical tone out of a digital computer. The second thing was how do you make two tones and make a score. Third thing was how do you make them sound good. And for today, we haven't figured any of that out yet. That's all I can say. So it's a continuing fun research topic with many inputs from different disciplines. Yes, short answer. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I guess it does. I thought there was some kind of goal or mission or something that you were trying to achieve with this more nirvana state that you haven't been able to get to yet.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I think, and art is like that, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Good evening. Thank you for interesting talk and presentation. My name is Sergey, and I'm actually in San Jose for the first time and in 01 for the first time, and I'm actually will be here just for 1 or 2 hours more. And I came from Moscow just several days ago, from Russia, and initially from Moscow State Conservatory, the Theremin Center.
Yep.
So basically, I can comment a lot about these things, and actually, if auditorium don't mind, I can do a small presentation, like for 7 minutes, and I have some slides, because what Jakub is doing with the Thermins is very, very similar to the technology that was elaborating in the Theremin Center, and maybe it will be interesting for the guys, because, yeah.
Maybe afterwards we can open it up, and as people are mingling, they'll be able to ask you questions about it. Do we have any other questions for either of our artists?
Yeah, so you talked earlier about like the programs are very deterministic, so they can't really improvise. But working with computer systems at a certain complexity, they actually seem to improvise, which we usually call bugs, and then we have to fix them. And you have to fix them. You treat the system as something living that doesn't do what you want. Do you ever encounter this, that the algorithms that you create become so complex that they do things that you didn't anticipate, and that it maybe then even makes sense and is useful?
Well, actually, they don't make sense. They are bugs for me, sorry. I hate them. So, for example, before I came here, I replaced one element of the system. The simple food switch change. But what I didn't realize until later was that change of the inputs caused the Stack Overflow bug. It took me a while to figure out why. It was simply because it came through MIDI. So I was really angry. Obviously, I fixed it. Now it's fine. But I hate these bugs. But what is the most important is actually not the errors of computers. I really want the computer to be predictable. My errors are more interesting. The fact that my hand will never land on the same place. The Theremin is actually not the best instrument or interface. If you have frets or piano keys, they're much better because you feel them. You are using your fingers there. They have the most nerve cells, and you have control over them. This one is very, very hard to be precise each time. But that's also beauty, that if I actually relax, I can have some kind of unpredictability, and still it's under my control. So that would be my thing. My bugs are more interesting, I would say, my human errors.
What's the level of live quantization that you're using?
Yeah, depends on the program. I'll just explain the quantization philosophy and like mechanics of it. Whenever you're triggering sounds, you can obviously trigger them whenever you want. So some of these actually they were happening when I was triggering them. But in most of the today's audio software, when you're using loops, so for example, even if it's one sound followed by something else, you definitely don't want to have even the smallest mistake, because you're losing groove. Even I would say 5 to 10 milliseconds, you would feel it. You would feel that something is wrong. They're losing sound. They're also designed to be exactly in millisecond precision. So what people are using is so-called quantization. You are triggering sound before, and then the computer waits for the proper signal. So for example, if the resolution is 16th notes, what I'm usually doing is I'm trying to hit it just before. So after the last 16th note of the beat, but definitely before the first beat. So the sound I want will land exactly on that. So it takes a little bit of adjustment. It also helps with latency, because you have to remember that computers, and more sounds I put, the more heavy is on the computer. So right now I think it's 13 milliseconds. So it also helps with dealing with that you're, especially with theremins, with gestures, after a while you adjust to latency. That actually I love personally when I change latency to, let's say, 25 milliseconds. It takes me a while to get used to it. But quantization, I believe it's a must whenever you're using loops or multi-tap delays, because there's no other justification. These sounds should not be landing offbeat, and that's one of the errors that I wouldn't accept. But once you have a quantization, you can actually make a little error on the sounds that are less crucial, little hi-hats. I try to very often relax my hand to actually get this error. And then I'm very cautious about downbeats and snare to make sure they are actually perfect. But other sounds I can be relaxed and see what happens if I allow a little bit of undeterministic feel to it.
I think we have time for one last question. Stephanie had a question. And then we want to leave time for you guys to talk to the both artists personally, and also I believe you're able to interact with both of their instruments. So
I have a very sort of practical question. So Ballet San Jose has made a commitment in this season to live music as a critical element to all of its performances with our company of dancers, and I think that any of us who are paying attention, you can really feel the tangible difference in the performance when there are other human beings that are generating the music that the dancers are responding to, but having a full orchestra pit of musicians is a very expensive proposition, and so in addition to being amazingly creative and wonderfully exciting for us, it's also very cost effective to have one person up there playing the music, and I am just wondering, and I think this is a question for both of you, in your process and music as generated through technology, do you have is there sort of a computer research in music and acoustics, like analog to the Hippocratic Oath of, how do you sort of think about what you're doing as related to an orchestra pit full of musicians?
So I can answer from my side. It's like really simple. I want the computer part to disappear. I'd like to be able to perform as a performer. Obviously I'm augmenting myself. I'm using tons of loudspeakers, but hide the loudspeakers, hide the wires. I want to be, I just want to be there, myself. And I want the reason that I'm using the computer to also be musically pertinent, right? So I guess that's Hippocratic. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, for me, there are two very different things. I would say I wouldn't even try to think of orchestra in relationship to any kind of electronic music, because I really think that orchestra is one of the one of the remnants of true live performance, because there is actually reason to hear it live. There's so much beauty in acoustic music, unamplified. I hate amplified orchestral projects. I hope there are not so many, but there's something beautiful when you hear the entire orchestra live that it's impossible to replicate through speakers. So I think there's beauty in it, and all other genres, whatever it's rock music or some pop music, you actually never hear the real sounds during the concert. They're all amplified sounds. So orchestra is beautiful by itself, and I think there is a perfectly sound reason to see the real dancers, not through the video camera, but real dancers with real orchestra. So that's a beautiful part. I believe that this should be very different, and we should try to make it as far away from traditional form as possible. This is more conceptual, I would think. This is more experiment about human interaction, dance, musician, electronics, the audience, how they respond, with the different process, what will happen. So I think that it's a very, very, very different thing.
All right, thank you guys, and thank everyone.
Thank you.